started in July, and actually is looking for a job if anybody out there is looking for someone. But she there are two major problems associated with the concept. The first is that it's not an accredited or recognized subspecialty of the ACGME, so that it was offered to her as a non-accredited year. Now, I've called the ACGME and they have not returned phone calls about starting a process to get this to be a recognized subspecialty. But I can tell you that for heart failure and transplant, it took like almost 10 years for them to get organized. So there's a lot of red tape involved in making that happen. The second problem, notwithstanding that, the second problem is funding. So Penn wasn't interested in paying for a fifth-year fellow, and I actually was able to go out and through philanthropy got the funding to make this happen. So that's the general sort of logistics piece.
Okay.
So those are two issues that we have to ultimately deal with, and then the third is to get some sort of uniform program for a year. And I guess that other people who are doing this have different concepts or time schedules of what they've done, and it may be an end result of today that everybody sends in what they are doing or what they plan to do for a year with a fellow, and then we can come back again with a compilation and figure out what the best practice is for the year. And now I'll be quiet.
Okay. Does anyone have any thoughts on what Joe has just said about the ACGME? Has anyone else tried to contact them or getting any more information on that thought?
Well, I can speak to that a little bit. I am a program director for our internal medicine residency program, so I know these sort of requirements well. And as was stated, I think that any possibility of getting this an ABIM certified specialty is extremely remote. Certainly would be a long time away. Again, as pointed out, if heart failure transplants, which is obviously a much larger piece of the pie, took so long and the efforts of so many to eventually make happen, it's unlikely this will, at least in any sort of short time frame. Think about it, nuclear cardiology, which again, in the scheme of things, has certainly been traditionally a bigger field than cardio-oncology. Certainly isn't, so it's worth probably exploring as has begun as a process of many years, but it's not likely to be any time in the future. And so I wholeheartedly agree. Those are the three challenges are funding, which is likely just going to have to be an institution by institution solution. Recognition, which at least from ABIM is unlikely, and then trying to come up with some uniform standards, and that's the one thing we can probably impact.
Okay, all right. So I think overall we all agree that the first 2 points are very difficult to really find the answer to, but to kind of uniform everyone and unite is the biggest thing that we can do. I had spoken to Jillian. Jillian, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I've just unmuted myself because, as everybody has just said, I mean, imaging as a whole isn't even accredited, so it'll be probably 10 years, but the process has to start somewhere. So this whole thing of us getting a fellows group together and getting a united front together is ultimately going to be what pushes this forward, because it's a behemoth of a thing trying to get it recognized. Even imaging isn't, as I say. So at the moment it's just a matter of we have to start somewhere. So that's the GME issue. I mean, as far as funding is concerned, because basically where I stand is I'm the same as probably Dr. Carver's fellow who I met. I'm 5th year. I'm actually in probably my 6th year as a fellow, and I've done a year of cardio-oncology / imaging funded completely externally, the exact same thing. The hospital wouldn't fund it, so we had to go looking, but we got funding. So I'm not even paid by the hospital. It's always the way, Millie. It'll always be for these things. You know, you get your funding. There's no question of GME at the moment, but we will try as a group and start the cogs turning. And then as far as I think the thing to talk about that you're probably going to go into next is what Dr. Carver's fellow does, you know, in their 24 months, and what you would think would be appropriate as your goals within the 24 months to put yourself in a position where you can be applying for jobs, you know, with some kind of confidence. So absolutely. I would imagine that's what you're thinking. So I'd say with the people we have on board, maybe, you know, we can talk about the GME stuff, but is that what you want to talk about next, what the existing fellows do within the 24 months?
So that's the next on my schedule, is really talking about, you know, a fellowship training program, the objectives, you know, curriculum design. I think that the biggest thing is to get a group together, whether it be me and you, Jillian and me, and then really kind of collect all the data that we have. Maybe Dr. Carver can give us some information on what his fellow does, you know, on a month-to-month basis, and what the program looks like, and try to create a uniformed, you know, setup so that I think that everyone who wants to do this is kind of doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay,
so I think. Go ahead.
If you want, I'll tell you what we have done.
Okay. Go ahead.
So. We had a little bit of a head start before the year started, and I arranged with the oncology service for her to rotate over a several-month period, a couple times a week, and make inpatient rounds with the solid tumor group and the heme and the hematologic malignancy group, just to get a sense of cancer patients, treatments, the language, and also for them to get to know her and recognize that she was going to be around. So as we started, we broke off the consultative cardiology from the consultative cardiology service, all of the oncology patients in the hospital.
Okay.
So we've basically been on service since July, and we see an average of probably 8 to 10 consults, inpatient consults a week. Okay. And from that group, she has tried to develop a small practice and follow up with them after discharge so that there's a patient cohort. On the days that I see patients, she sees them with me like in a typical fellow fashion. So okay. She may go in and see a new patient and evaluate them, and then we discuss it, and then I go in and do my piece. From a research standpoint, we have a bunch of projects, most of which are data review, and because my partner in crime, Bonnie Key, spends most of her time as a researcher, that we take advantage of that and have added that to the program. We meet every other week and developed a curriculum where she presents to sort of go through a whole list of topics, and Bonnie, Lavinia, and I meet for a half hour every other week to do that piece of it. Okay. And that's sort of it. That's the majority of what she's doing. We also got a handheld echo machine, and we've been testing the utility of that in conjunction with clinical assessment to A, take some of the burden off the echo lab, and B, to get some sense of whether or not this is a useful tool to be carrying around. in cancer patients.
Okay.
So that's sort of the year we've.
This is Eric, Julie.
Hi, Dr. Harrison.
Hi, I think Susan Dent has a question, Joe. We can interrupt for just a second. Susan Dent has her hand up.
Go ahead.
Hello, Susan. Do you have a question? Well, she has her hand up, but Susan, can you hear us? Well, go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so that's it. I think that the biggest problem has been that the actual clinical experience tends to overtake everything else, and that trying to, when we had sort of a mid-year review, trying to force her not to come to clinic with me each time and to get some protected time to work on the research projects that we have been doing. We actually wrote a grant that we got a small amount of money from a foundation to establish a regional survivorship network, and we're out recruiting institutions to join that, and we're going to have a whole day conference in June that we're planning. So that's sort of the year.
Overall, okay. Is Dr. Dent on the line? I wanted to get her input on what she thought about her program that she set up in Ottawa. Dr. Dent, I'm not sure if she's with us anymore.
Yeah, she's registered, but I don't see her responding. I have to keep muting Gillen because there's feedback from Gillen's mic.
In the end, this is Ron. This is Ron Wittels. I can tell you what we are doing this year. This year at Stanford. So we've been fortunate enough to have similarly a fifth-year fellow who's doing a off the books, if you will, cardio-oncology fellowship this year. We don't have permanent funding for it. This was actually funded because her institution, where she's going to be going afterwards, the University of British Columbia, specifically wants her to fill this role, and therefore is actually paying her salary this year to support her for both clinical experience and research. We have crafted it to be far more outpatient based. In fact, it's almost exclusively outpatient. So other than when one of the patients from the outpatient side is admitted, that we will consult on. And the other thing that differs, and we've done that simply to make the trade-off to have more research time. Although obviously we get something from the inpatient time, but worrying that as Dr. Carver was getting at, the potential to be swallowed up otherwise by the clinical inpatient side. The other thing is that we have a large active amyloid group, a large amyloid patient population, and an amyloid clinic. And in our mind, saw this as somewhat of an extension of cardio-oncology, and so she's very active in that as well. Again, it's a one-year fellowship. Somebody was in 24 months earlier. I think one of the debates would be the length. I think it would be tough to make this standardly more than a year. I think it would be hard to consistently get people who want to do it.
Thanks, Ron. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and Ron, I agree with you. I think that that we teach basic architecture and principles. The landscape of drugs changes every month, so that it's not. This isn't like a memorization feedback program.
Yeah.
Okay.
If it's okay, can I talk to you, Millie, or?
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you need somebody? Okay, so yeah, it was me who mentioned 24 months. This is Gillian here again. The reason being that I had the luxury of both funding and the visa, to be honest, was the other issue for me that won't come into it for Americans, but for the foreigners like me, it's a concern. So because of my visa status and because I could get funding, I was able to do the 24 months and it just suited me. So yeah, I mean 12 months, 24 months, whichever. I think it's what bases do you want to cover within the time frame. So I'll give you a suggestion for what I do, and then you know what I would think would be what I do anyway is, and what I think would be a good idea for you to think about. Can you hear me okay? I don't know where the feedback is coming from.
You're coming in clear to me.
Okay, I'm in the middle of nowhere here, so I'm not in work today, so you shouldn't be hearing anything strange. So okay, so when I started out, we reckoned we had to cover oncology bases. I had already done about 6 months of oncology at a more junior level. Cardiology bases, it was divided between, and I'm looking at notes I had down originally here, heart failure, imaging, and research. And of course, imaging takes over for me, because if you can aim to get, I don't know whether you have the boards, you probably do in echo, plus level 3 SCMR is good to have under your belt, then should you fall into any problems with getting a job in terms of cardio-oncology, you will always have the imaging to fall back on to keep, to be honest, to keep the money coming in. So, you know, that's what a lot of us at the more junior level would be thinking, is if you have, you know, boards in echo plus or minus nuclear CT and then level 3 SCMR, it's a good place to come from. So I basically do, within the time frame of a week, I do 3 days of more clinical sort of imaging based, and then I do 2 days a week between research, consults, and an outpatient clinic that's about 75 to 80% cardio-oncology. So really it's research, cardio-oncology clinic, and consults. And those consults are, as Dr. Carver was saying, gleaned from, you know, both cardiology and oncology sides. So effectively because I had 24 months, what I would have been planning to do was 18 months of imaging and then about 6 months of heart failure. And that's probably not ultimately what will happen, but that concept of doing some time in heart failure was introduced to me by one of the guys in Boston, and he always felt that it really added to his knowledge base, because effectively, you know, the imaging will cover you for both a standby, and also if you have some heart failure experience, it's useful when these patients get into serious trouble. So that's just a thought. Imaging, failure, and then 3 days a week, and then the other 2 days between research, consults, and clinic. So that's just how we do it. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so what I would say to you is, as Dr. Carver said, one major thing to get going, even before you start, if you can, is a pilot grant application, an IRB application for some kind of, obviously, imaging / biomarker based research project, which will both allow you to hit the ground running if you can in terms of research, and also look obviously good on your CV in terms of getting funding. So that's something I would advise you to try and do, is put together your own protocol and have it ready to go to IRB and pilot grant status. Most pilot grants will be going in around now, so the idea would be to have your protocol ready. So that's one important thing with the research front, is hit the ground running. And other than that, you know, it just depends on what's available to you locally. You know what I mean? But that's the way we worked it anyway. About 60% sort of imaging, and then I probably will try and get in some heart failure time. But it's just another thing to think about, is could you dip your toe into heart failure as well, if you can, just to get some experience there. So, I mean, you know, like the way I'm running things differs because of my visa status. Everybody, you know, has to remember that. If I could, absolutely. You know, there's things I cannot do, and you know, like I said to you, I wouldn't worry about the GME status thing, because it's not something at our point we will have to deal with. We just have to try and help with that as much as we can, but it'll not happen in our cardio-oncology trainee lifetime anyway. So that's it.
That's it. Any of the other programs have incorporated imaging at all, Dr. Carver?
Yeah, so she has passed the echo boards, and I've forced her to to read echoes one morning a week.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I suspect that most people who do this will be people who have done advanced heart failure. Maybe not everybody, but probably anybody who's considering this as a serious career from a cardiology standpoint usually has a heart failure interest, and so most people come in with that. But I think the imaging obviously is such an important part of the evaluation of these patients that we'll want to develop uniform standards, some form of training and imaging, but obviously specifically around the questions of early detection, et cetera, would be where the focus
Would be the key. Okay. All right. I think, Jillian, the biggest thing, if you would help me out, is to maybe kind of get everyone's thoughts now that we have them together, in one format, and maybe try to create some sort of backbone for a curriculum that will, kind of guide us. Because I think you had said you had contacted about maybe 20 fellows across the country who are kind of doing their own, plan or game plan with this cardio-oncology situation. I appreciate the research information, and that I'll definitely look into with the IRP and the pilot grant as soon as I can, so that I can get that started early, so that won't be an issue. Dr. Carver, Dr. Whittles, if it's possible, if you have anything written on paper, or maybe if you can just send me a quick email about, what your fellows are doing more specifically, if you do have anything else to add, that would be very helpful. And then what I'm going to do is kind of set up a kind of a protocol and curriculum, go over it with Dr. Harrison, and then I can email you all of that detail as well. As for, the GME and ACGME, I'm happy to, work with, Jillian and I can kind of get this kind of ball rolling. Obviously, it's not going to happen in our lifetime, at least in the cardio-onc days, but, someone has to kind of get it started. So I definitely don't mind doing that as well, with obviously someone's guidance from the senior level. Dr. Harrison, do you have any points to add?
So it sounds like that the GME thing is just too damn slow for our modern world, where everything's accelerating so fast that we need to get them on the ball. And so that's unfortunate, the ABIM and the GME. We do intend on cardiac imaging being a big part of this program, and we have a cardiac imaging fellow, fourth year, so that will seem to match pretty well. We also are part of the SUCCOUR study, SUCCOUR, from Tom Marek using ECHO with GE. And so that will give you a study already. All you have to do is submit it to the university IRB. We're submitting to Western IRB. All you have to do is submit it to University of South Florida IRB, and you'll already be part of a study. As far as funding, we'll have to work on that.
Okay, I think someone else was trying to say something earlier. Dr. Carver.
Millie?
Yep, I can hear you.
It's Gillian here again. I don't know if Dr. Carver is there. I was just going to say, to round up what you were saying, luckily we have contact details for, I think we must have almost every cardio-oncology fellow in the country by now. So what I was going to do was email everyone and say, exactly what you're doing, get information on what they are doing, and then we need to, as part of the fellows group, we need to establish who is going to be our kind of senior advisory panel and what role this group is going to play in terms of, there's ACC interest, of course, there's the GME things to sort out, but certainly Dr. Dent, Dr. Douglas, Dan Lenihan, I suppose, is up to his eyeballs, but is an obvious person. Dr. Carver, you're happy to be kind of one of our steering committee for the fellows?
Yeah, absolutely. And guys, it's just Joe. What does Dr. Carver say?
You see, you don't get it. In Ireland, you'd be probably murdered for saying something like that. So you'll have to excuse my inability to transfer to American. I had the same problem in Australia. I just couldn't get used to using first names. It's just, it's weird for me.
Yeah, so the answer is yes.
Great. So I think the people who have, like I say, declared the most interest are yourself, Dr. Dent, Pam Douglas, Dan, I suppose, and probably Rob Steingart. There's a group of people who sort of have naturally assumed more of a kind of a steering committee role. So I think what I'll do is send one more last big group email and check does anybody else want to be on that kind of steering committee for the fellows group. And then we should have 20 fellows giving us their information. We should have a fair idea of who's our senior advisory panel. And Millie, if you, me, probably the UPenn fellow, of course, and John Rourke from Boston would probably be the most obvious choices for the fellows to take kind of charge of sort of sorting this out. We will, yeah, I think our job will be to put together what everybody is doing and what everybody would like to do or what lessons they've learned by coming through their own training program. And then once we have that, we should, as a group, of course, like I say, try and get the GME thing up and running along with ICOS, ACC, anyone else who's willing to help with that, because that's just a, like I say, it's just a beast of a thing, but it has to start somewhere. So yeah, so between today and Thursday, I will send one last big ICOS email list with all the fellows as well.
And just CC me on that one as well, so I'll just kind of keep track of what's coming through.
Well, you've accidentally tripped into being one of these more prominent fellows in the group, Millie, so it's
I don't mind at all. That's what I wanted to be, so that works out.
Great.
Hey, Jillian, this is Dr. Harrison. I'm in too, and Dr. Lanahan is in also. And we can do this under the ICOS umbrella.
Yeah.
And so that's no problem. Dr. Lanahan and I have talked that over, so we both want to be on the steering committee.
Good.
And take a leadership role here.
So I kind of assumed that you would, considering you're running this. So sorry I didn't actually say your name, but I kind of automatically thought.
No problem, no problem. So, and Dan's in too. Dan couldn't attend today, but he's in also, and will be under the ICOS heading.
Yeah,
and I think that Rich Steingart probably is interested. I spoke with him last week. You know, at the ICOS meeting, he talked about curriculum stuff. So he's done a lot of legwork, groundwork here, and probably would be a reasonable person to. I'll volunteer him also.
Yeah, I spoke to him. He was the first person I approached when I sat beside your UPenn fellow and suddenly had a light bulb moment and went, why do I not know who the other fellows are?
Yeah.
And so I walked up to him. So I'll give you, just to be sure I've got a fair idea of who everybody thinks would be the kind of more prominent. I have yourself, Dr. Carver, I have Dr. Harrison, Dr. Lanahan, Dr. Steingart, Dr. Dent, Dr. Douglas, Dr. Yusuf as well. Wamik Yusuf was very interested. Am I missing anybody very obvious there in terms of a fellow committee steering group?
Maybe Dr. Bonchi's there at MD Anderson, who's with Dr. Yusuf. He runs the Echo Lab there. He was one of my students.
Okay. I think that's probably...
If interested, I'm happy to be part of it as well. Again, this is Ron with Ellis from Stanford.
Oh, yeah, great. Okay.
And I think, Ron Whittley left us, but he has experience also in at least the West Coast perspective.
Oh, no, we need him.
Yes, we need the left coast has to be involved. So basically, we've been doing these meetings for ICOS for the best practice model, and that's on the fourth Thursday of the month. And then on the second Thursday of the month, we've been doing the cardiac case webinar for ICOS. And so as soon as when we get the wrapped up, when we wrap up the best practice document, which should be within a month or two, then we can devote the fourth Thursday to this project. And so we can have our regular meetings at that time.
All right, we're going to
Hello, there was a comment?
No, I said we're going to finish the ICOS document on Thursday.
Yeah, then we finish that. Then we could divert the fourth Thursday. Then will be for our steering committee for the fellows.
Okay, that's good. I have to go see a patient, guys. I thank
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for organizing this and for everybody taking the time to do this. It's a good start.
Thank you so much for attending. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I've got to go to the clinic here, Millie, so I'm going to sign off
Absolutely.
also. Thank you
Sounds
so
good.
much.
Okay.
Can you
Jillian,
see
I'll
the
give you a
screen?
call later today.
Did you
Yeah,
get your,
talk to you later.
Did you get
Okay.
what you needed on the screen, Millie?
Yeah, we're okay. It looks good.
Great, thanks.
All right.
Thanks,
Thanks, Dr. Harrison. Okay, I'll call you later, Jillian. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you.
Bye.